Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Kevin Zwicker from Fast Count, and this is your AEW Dynamite post show for September 24th, 2025. This is your show coming out of All Out. If you guys were able to catch the show on Saturday, it was a very eventful show. We got the returns of individuals. We got the debuts of individuals. We got big-time title changes. It was a pretty eventful show. I think it's fair to say that out of the two shows that took place on Saturday, All Out and WrestlePalooza, I do think that All Out was the stronger out of the two shows. And coming out of this show, there was a lot of different questions, right? It was announced that Statlander versus Mia Shirakawa was going to be the main event. For Statlander is the new AEW World Champion. Kyle Fletcher, he went toe-to-toe with Hangman Adam Page. He took him to the limit, but Hangman was able to retain. It was teased that we were going to get the return of Orange Cassidy, which we did, in fact, get. And this was a show that took place at Pittsburgh, right? It took place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So, of course, when you hear Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you think when it comes to AEW, you think of none other than Britt Baker, right? So I think, especially with it being announced that the women are going to main event the show, I think a lot of people were anticipating the return of Britt Baker. I know personally I was. It turns out that wasn't the case. And it really kind of brings up a lot of different questions now that, with the show taking place in Pittsburgh and we still see no Britt Baker, it really puts into question as to if we're ever going to see Britt Baker. I know that, a couple of months ago, it was reported that Britt was basically persona non grata in AEW. She was basically not welcomed, and with the fact that the show took place in her hometown, the women main event of the show, it kind of looked like a perfect scenario for her to make a return, and that it didn't happen. I think it's safe to say that the chances of her ever returning to AEW might be very slim in the near future. But it's a pretty stacked show. Next week is the AEW anniversary. I think it's the 6-year anniversary, so they're kind of wanting to stack that show as much as they possibly can. And it was an announcement teased, a big announcement teased that was going to take place tonight. And going into this, every time we hear Tony Khan has a big announcement, it's been kind of hit or miss. I remember the very infamous, time where he promoted that they were going to have a big announcement, and it ended up being pre-sale for all-in tickets, and that left many people disappointed. But I think that this announcement that we got tonight was, I think it was worth the hype. Wasn't as big as the acquisition of ROH, but it is significant development when it comes to the women and the tag team division there. She was at the office, most likely, but you would think that she'd be able to make some time for Pittsburgh. But guys, before we get into the show, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. Hitting the like button helps the channel out more ways than you guys even know. And we start off the show with Hangman. A video package shows Hangman. Hangman, he praised Kyle Fletcher for taking him to the limit at All Out. And he basically stated that, take this moment the same way that I took my moment when I lost to Chris Jericho to crown the first ever AEW champion. Take that moment and use it as motivation for the future. He issues out an open challenge, and he issues out the open challenge to who he considers to be the most talented guy out of the city. The show took place in Pittsburgh, like I said, and that is Lee Moriarty. They have a AEW World title match later on in the show, which we're going to discuss when it's time to discuss it. It was actually pretty good. Lee Moriarty, if you guys haven't been able to check out his work in Ring of Honor, I know it's under a paywall, so a lot of people don't. But if you ever have a chance to catch some things here or there on YouTube, Lee Moriarty has really been putting in a lot of work down there. And it's been some good stuff. Tag belts for the ladies are good. I think the idea is good, but AEW already has a lot of championships. And for me, we have this argument back and forth all the time online, whether it's, it's too many titles. Does it devalue, the titles in itself? And there's an argument for it, but if we're really trying to establish the women's division as, on par with the men, I think that we should, tag titles for the women is a good idea. And I think that now, especially, in the beginning days of AEW, the tag team division was kind of its calling card. with tag teams like the Bucks and the Lucha Bros and stuff like that for the men. Now for the women, we're starting to establish more tag teams. Harley Cameron and Chris Statlander, Tony Storm and Mia Shirakawa. We're starting to get the groundswell work in place where we can have multiple women for those belts, and it would make sense. But we start off the show with an AEW Tag Team Championship match. Brodito, who was able to retain their tag team championships in that ladder match at All Out, going up against GOA and Ricochet, coming off of their big-time win against the Hurt Syndicate, a group that we did not see this week after they lost at All Out. That's fine with me. Gives an opportunity for more people to get television time. But GOA, now with this association they have with Ricochet, has really given them an opportunity to, get more time on TV, be more involved in some meaningful storylines. And they look good. These are two very strong guys, two very intimidating individuals, when it comes to, stature-wise. And they were able to hold their own against Brodito. They've kind of been a revelation for the tag team division. A lot of times we have these Frankenstein tag teams, it's kind of hit or miss. And I think this has been a big hit for AEW, kind of out of nowhere. There's a lot of times in this match where GOA were able to, really manhandle, Bandito and other opportunities where they were able to manhandle Brody King. Brody King is a big individual, so that made it a little bit more impressive. There was a spot where they were brawling on the outside, and Aubrey Adams, she was over there. Did I say Aubrey Adams? Aubrey was able to sit there and lost my train of thought. Aubrey was over there checking up on the guys where they were over there by the announce table, and Ricochet was able to, with her being distracted, went into the ring. He teased that he was going to do a chair shot. Aubrey catches him, ejects Ricochet from ringside, and Bandito was able to hit the 21 plex on Khan to pick up the win. Brodito, they were able to retain the AEW Tag Team Championship. Big time win for Brodito to continue the momentum that they are riding, that they have been riding for the last several weeks. They're going to have to get some new women too. I'm pretty sure that they are going to be making some phone calls. They're going to be making some phone calls, and they're going to be able to stack that women's division even more. We get a backstage segment with the conglomeration. We get a little bit of a refresher of what went down All Out with Mark Briscoe picking up the big win against MJF. It was announced that they are going to be challenging the Don Callis family in a 6-man tag match. There is a mystery partner that they were teasing. Very obvious, but we're going to continue to tease it. It was announced that Don Callis has picked his men. It's going to be Hechicero, Okada, and Takeshita. And Mark Briscoe was asked who is going to be their mystery opponent. And basically, Mark Briscoe, they started to be able to tease their opponent. It made it very obvious. It's the word of the day is mystery. It was just dropping all these different OC hints, putting on the glasses, mentioning the word orange, all these different things, making it very obvious that we are going to get the return of one of AEW's biggest homegrown talents in Orange Cassidy. We get a backstage segment with Chris Statlander, our new AEW Women's Champion. She was able to get a big win against Toni Storm, who we also did not see tonight. Chris Statlander, she gets an intro from Harley Cameron, and she says, she's beat up after her match against Toni Storm, but she's a fighting champion, and says she loves Mina. She said, but somebody has to be her first. And then she's asked by Renee, what is your association with the Death Riders? And she says, things move fast when you make decisions, and we kind of leave it at that. Chris Statlander, AEW original, now the AEW World Champion. Big win for her as well. Good to see some of these AEW originals being rewarded for the work that they've been putting in. And nice. Hangman versus Lee Moriarty is taking place. Lee Moriarty, who is, really associated with technical wrestling, similar in the vein of somebody like Zack Sabre Jr., Hangman Adam Page. Not so much, but he is somebody who could adapt to the style. And they did a lot of bridge wrestling, a lot of mat wrestling. Sorry, to start off this match. It looked as if Hangman was getting circles. He was getting wrestled in circles. Lee Moriarty was basically able to toy with him for good portions of the match. Then eventually Hangman was able to work his way back, kind of infuse more of his style into this match. Lee Moriarty was able to stretch Hangman at different points in the match, but then Hangman was able to hit the Deadeye to pick up the win. I know that even though Lee Moriarty took an L, he was able to be featured on Dynamite, and he was able to have a world title match with the top guy in the company and was able to hold his own. So I think there was a win and a loss for Lee. I think that he was able to make the most of his opportunity and was able to put on for his hometown, because Lee Moriarty is also a Pittsburgh guy. They were in Pittsburgh, so I think this was a win-win all around for everybody involved. Guys, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. It is very helpful in that way. Next, we get a backstage segment with Cope and Christian Cage. It is Fallout from All Out. If you guys did not check out All Out, you saw FTR. They sat there and they basically pile drivered Adam Copeland's wife, Beth Phoenix, and they laid her out. We see Adam Copeland going back into the dressing room that him and Christian were sharing. Christian is icing himself. He, obviously Cope is very frantic after seeing his wife be laid out like that. Christian asks him, what's wrong? And Cope says, I gotta go. I gotta go. This whole thing is affecting my family. This isn't the first time that this has happened. I gotta go. And he says, I gotta take care of my family. And you see Christian, he tells him, he's like, I don't have a family anymore. So go and take care of yours. Cope, he looks at him and he says, you do have a family. He shakes his hand and then he leaves, teasing that he is going to be gone for a while. I know a lot of people online speculated that, Cope is leaving to go have one final match with John Cena for this retirement tour. I think that is wishful thinking, and whatever you are on, I think that I would like a little bit of that as well, because I think that there's a better chance that KFC starts selling hamburgers, and then we see AEW and WWE working together to orchestrate such a match where AEW gets no benefit whatsoever. WWE gets all the benefit in that situation. And I don't believe that Tony Khan is inclined to help WWE in any way at this moment. Is there been sightings somewhere in the WWE so Cena had a last match? Like I said, it's just wishful thinking. It was announced today that at Crown Jewel in Perth, after much uproar, we are going to get John Cena going up against AJ Styles in one final match. But what's so funny, the way that they storyline wise they're booking this. Obviously, I think that this was the part of the plan the whole time. But storyline, the way that they're booking it is, John Cena was on Twitter calling out Triple H, for not listening to the fans and not booking the match. You see, AJ Styles, saying, I'm ready to go and let's do this. And basically, in kayfabe, the storyline is, Triple H, you are such a shitty booker for not making this match that we basically staged a revolt for you to make this match happen. So it's just so weird, the way certain things have been booked over there in the last several weeks. But hey, the match is happening. That's all that matters, right? Next, we get an in-ring promo for FTR. FTR coming off of that big momentous moment where they did lay out Adam Copeland and his wife. Tony Schiavone gives them the intro. They come out and he says what happened at All Out was the worst thing he's ever seen in the AEW ring. Cash starts off the promo and he says, because everybody's giving him such boos, he's like, we deserve the boos after what went down at All Out. After what that we did, it was, really keeping me up at night. It wasn't our intentions to do that. Our intentions were to retire Cope and Christian and have them ride out in the sunset. And he says, but Cope, he didn't want to let that happen. He wanted to bring his friends, his wife. He wanted to get them involved. So in his eyes, what went down was all Cope's fault. We see Stokely start off talking, and he says, he forgives Beth Phoenix, for what she did at All Out. And he says, when I ran up on Beth Phoenix, my intention wasn't to attack her. My intention was to introduce myself. You say Chivalry is dead, but I allowed her to spear me, and it didn't even hurt. Then we finally get to Dax. And Dax, he says, he was advised to apologize, but, he wants to apologize, to Beth for the most part. He doesn't really want to apologize to Cope and Christian. He says, Beth, as long as we've known each other, as long as we've been friends, you know that I would never, lay my hands on you. I would never lay my hands on a woman, but you punched me in the face, my broken nose, you made my eyes water, and after you made my eyes water, I couldn't see. I thought that you were your husband, Cope, so I was defending myself, and I dropped him on his head. And then, that's all we kind of got from Dax. Then we get Willow Nightingale to interrupt them. Willow Nightingale, she says, that was a great apology. It wasn't very sincere, and she says that if you guys were more sincere about your apology and things like that, maybe you would have won. And she starts to put over Beth Phoenix. She says, women like Beth Phoenix are the reason why I wrestle. Women like Beth Phoenix are the reason why I came back from a broken freaking neck. Shout out to Kurt Angle in his city of Pittsburgh. And she says, you guys are going to, apologize. And she sits there, and Stokely basically tells her that it's past your bedtime. Get out the ring. She hits Stokely. FTR look as if that they're going to attack Willow Nightingale, but she gets saved by Jet Speed. And we see Jet Speed shoulder and shoulder with Willow Nightingale. And they are celebrating in the ring for taking out FTR. FTR versus Jet Speed, that's a match that I could see myself getting interested in. I think that Cope is going to be taking a break for a while. Who knows? Maybe that is to film the next season of the Percy Jackson show. Or maybe he has another role somewhere else. Or maybe he's just nursing an injury. But it looks as if, at least for a couple weeks, we're going to have Cope off TV. But, yeah, good stuff there. FTR, I think that what they're doing, the work that they're doing is very good. I think that they were stale for a little bit, as baby faces. I think this pairing with Stokely and this feud that they have going on with Cope and Christian, I think that's really kind of revitalized my interest in them. Cope and Christian, you kind of knew that as soon as Cope came over to AEW that they were going to tag team. It was more of a when, not if. And I think that this is a perfect pairing, for Cope and Christian, especially due to the fact that in real life, FTR and Cope are really close friends. So going into this, especially coming out of Revolution, where Cope and Mox really had such a bad match, and people were very, anti-Cope. I think this feud that he's had with the FTR right now, I think it's really been able to sway, his self back into the good graces of a lot of people. Guys, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. It helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. And always remember that it's free. We cut to a promo from MJF immediately following his loss against Mark Briscoe. And MJF, he says that he's so angry that he doesn't even have the energy to yell. He said that he was the biggest star in the industry at one point, company regardless. And he said, he had Adam Cole by his side. Adam Cole broke his heart. He says ever since he lost his belt, he kind of has lost his way. If you guys remember, he had to rehab after losing the belt to Samoa Joe because of an injury. So he was kind of in a dark place at that point. And he says, he's lost his mojo since losing the title. He says, he won't come back until that, for a while. And he won't come back until he is the most dangerous version of himself. He says guys like Will Ospreay, Swerve Strickland, and Hangman Adam Page, he left them in the dust at one point, and now he is eating their dust. And he says that he's not used to this. and that he is going to come back. And when he comes back, he is going to come back on top. He's probably going off for his honeymoon. If you guys don't know, he's recently gotten married. He's talking about it before, so good on him. I hope that he gets a few weeks to really enjoy himself and relax. He's been working extremely hard as of lately. If you guys haven't been noticing his schedule, the day of All Out, he had a match in CMLL. He lost to Mystico, and then he immediately hopped on a flight to Canada and wrestled 2 matches in the same day. Busy guy. And with all the stresses of dealing with planning a wedding and the wrestling schedule that he has, the guy deserves some time off. Next, we get into this trios match between Okada, Hechicero, Takeshita, Mark Briscoe, Hologram, and their mystery opponent. He needs a vacation mad lately. Definitely, the guy has not been in the best of moods. But Don Callis, he starts off this before the match. He's teasing, revealing a painting. He teases. He's like, I'm not just such a great manager. I'm also a painting, and this is my latest masterpiece. He says this is going to be the biggest painting to date. He has somebody reel it out. It has kind of like a cloth over it, where you don't see it. They take the cloth off. It is revealed to be a returning Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy walked through the flame. We hear Jane. People are going crazy. The return of the King. OC, as soon as he walks into the ring, he just drop kicks Takeshita and Hechicero. They're playing Jane longer than they usually do. And OC comes off looking like $1 million. Eventually, he is taken out by Okada. And that is when kind of all hell breaks loose. We see Hologram and we see Mark Briscoe dive on the outside to take out the Don Callis family. Then we see OC do it as well, but very lazily. This is a good match. I think OC came out and he looked like $1 million. Coming off of that long injury. If you guys remember, OC was running really, really hard prior to him taking the injury. And the injury, at least to me, was kind of a blessing in disguise because he gave an opportunity for Orange Cassidy to take some time off. It wasn't Jane. It was out to the Pixies. You're right. My bad. Same thing, right? You know what I meant. But and he came out looking refreshed. I think that now this is an opportunity for him to really establish himself in a really strong division. And he looked really good. Looked really good. Hologram was able to pick up the win for his team. He hit the portal bomb on Hechicero. After the match, we see Kyle Fletcher come out. Kyle Fletcher, he arrived. He says, after all that, he proved that he belonged in the main event. He proved that he is the greatest TNT champion of all time. He says, but one thing that Hangman was right about, he said, the next morning, that was the worst I've ever felt in my life. And he said, I looked into the mirror and I had to remember who I was. He says, he looks into the ring and he sees a bunch of dorks. And he says, but he's in search for a kind of a new moment. And he looks into the ring and he sees Hologram and he acknowledges the fact that Hologram has the longest winning streak in AEW history. He challenges Hologram next week to a title versus streak match. He says that Hologram has a streak because he hasn't faced Kyle Fletcher. He's scared of Kyle Fletcher. So next week, we're going to get a big match on the anniversary show between these two guys. I think I'm looking forward to that. Kyle Fletcher, he is a guy who has kind of been in the news lately. If you guys watch any of Stevie Richards' content, he basically came out and said that Kyle Fletcher is so unpolished in the ring that he is not even good enough to wrestle guys in NXT. He basically said that he needs to go to NXT to learn basically how to get to the level to where he can hang with the guys in NXT, which to me, I don't know. On one hand, you hear these guys who are wrestlers, and even if you want to sit there, and people want to sit there and shit on the fact that Stevie Richards was, let's face it, a jobber for the majority of his career, but the guy wrestled at the highest level. The guy was in WWE for multiple years. So the guy knows something about the professional wrestling business. So it's like, on one hand, It's like, okay, do you question some guy who spent multiple years in WWE about wrestling? But then on the other hand, it's like statements like that are so ridiculous that it's like you kind of have no choice but to question it. It's an interesting position to be in. It really is. Next, we get a backstage segment from Mina Shirakawa. Mina, she says, since Saturday, I haven't heard from Tony Storm. She says, but me and Tony, we fight hard and we love hard. Tonight, I'm fighting for Tony Storm. Tonight, I'm fighting for me. And tonight, I'm fighting for the AEW Championship. We get a Lucha Express video package, basically kind of a rehash of what we saw at All Out, where we see Jack Perry going to the middle of the desert and digging out Luchasaurus from his grave and hooking him up to IVs and revitalizing him. And we kind of get through that whole revisit of that package. We get career highlights of them as Lucha Express, and it's revealed that next week we are getting the return of Lucha Express. It's kind of funny, right? Now, after the incident with CM Punk and the heel turn, they kind of positioned Jack Perry, in a prominent way to where they were going to really, especially with that angle as well, where he joined the Elite and he pile drivered Tony Khan. It looked as if they had super big plans for Jack Perry and this new version of the character, the scapegoat version of the character, and all in the end, they ended up putting him back in the original version of the character that he was playing previous to that. So it's just like, wow, they put in effort to give us this new version of Jack, and he just ends up being in the same spot that he was before. But at the same time, it's like it really wasn't working. At least in my eyes, this heel Jack Perry, I think that the guy, he has one of those faces to where it's like, it's just not natural to boo the guy. He has this baby face, literally this baby face, to where it's just like, could I really, take this guy seriously as this angry threat? I don't really think so. Very similar to how guys like Sammy Guevara and The Miz, have natural punchable faces, to where I think that they're always going to be better as heels, and anytime that they attempt to make them baby faces is not just doesn't feel right. I think Jack Perry as a heel just wasn't working. Jack could be dark. It's creative. Sometimes I think it's a little bit of a mix of both. I think that it's a little bit of a mix of both. I think that Tony had an initial good idea for Jack as a heel. I think that it kind of snowballed to where it became something to where it just wasn't working. I think that Jack isn't the strongest of promos. He's not the worst on the AEW roster, but the guy's nowhere near, Steve Austin on that mic. So I think it was a little bit of a mix of both. But we're going to see with Jurassic Express back in AEW together. I think that makes the AEW tag team division just that much stronger now with them being involved. Next, we get into the big announcement that was teased by Tony Khan. And the cat was kind of out of the bag with this one, but you never know. And Tony, he comes out and he says, AEW, this is, we're the best wrestle and all of that. He says, I'm especially proud of the women's division. And later on this year, we are going to introduce women's tag team championships. And then we see Renee with a tarp over the belts. And he goes to Renee, says, reveal the belts. She reveals it. Very similar to the men's AEW Tag Team Championship, but nice belts in themselves. We talked about it a little bit earlier. I think this is good for the women, and I think that it makes it, a little bit more so to where they're on par with the men now that they have a Tag Team Championship in the women's division. I really hope he does it. Come out of the dang loincloth. I think... shoot. At least they're not calling him Jungle Boy, right? At least he should go by Jungle Man or something. But who knows? Next, we get into the main event. Chris Statlander, Mina Shirakawa, Women's AEW Championship. And for the most part, Mina, had Statlander on the ropes. Mina is a crowd favorite, personal favorite of myself as well. Mina, she was able to get her moves in for every time. Mina, was able to put on an offensive onslaught. Chris Statlander felt as if she was able to withstand it and then come back at some point. Chris Statlander, obviously she has the big strength advantage over Mina. And for the most part, this was 80% Mina on offense. And Statlander was on defense for the most part. Prior to the match, she had Wheeler Yuta whisper something to her. And for the last 3 matches in a row, we have seen that happen as well. But Chris Statlander, she was able to win the match with the seatbelt. Wheeler Yuta comes out, he hugs her, he congrats her. The other Death Riders circle the ring. And then we see Jon Moxley, and we see Marina come out, and we see Statlander kind of have a very serious demeanor. The Death Riders are surrounding the ring. Harley Cameron is also in the ring, and we see Jon Moxley step into the ring with Marina as well. It looks as if we're going to get a tease of Harley Cameron getting Statlander beat down, and then we see Wheeler Yuta be taken out by Stat. We see Harley Cameron get out of the ring. We see Marina get clotheslined by Stat. We see her flick off Jon Moxley. We see her run into the crowd with Harley. And we see it. She denies the Death Riders. And before we can really see anything more developed with that, we get Darby Allin coming out. Darby Allin lost to Jon Moxley in the coffin match at All Out. But if you saw it, you saw him set Jon Moxley on fire. And we see Darby Allin come out with a flamethrower. Not the first time we've seen Darby Allin with a flamethrower. And he comes out and he's able to, back off all of the Death Riders with the flamethrower. And he says, John, he says, what is it going to get you through your head that I'm not going to quit? And at Wrestle Dream, he challenges Jon Moxley to an I Quit match. And that's how we end this show. Moxley, Darby, I Quit match. That's going to be extremely violent. Expect blood everywhere. Expect, I don't even know what to expect when we see the match like that. It wouldn't surprise me if we see somebody get one of their limbs removed. Jon Moxley, it's been a good week for him. It was announced earlier, I think it was yesterday, that he was number 2 on the PWI 500 list. Right there behind Cody Rhodes. So it's been a very deserving to me. I think in my mind, Tanahashi is considered the ace of New Japan. I think that Jon Moxley is considered the ace of AEW. Just throughout its whole history, when the CM Punk situation happened, who was the guy who stepped up? Jon Moxley. When we wanted to really coronate Hangman Adam Page and have that big time emotional moment at All In, who was the guy who they paired up to elevate Hangman Page in that scenario? Jon Moxley. Anytime they have need, Jon Moxley was the guy who Bryan Danielson picked to be his last match. So very much so respected by his peers. Very much so the guy who anytime AEW has needed somebody to step up, he's been that guy. So I think number 2, right behind Cody Rhodes, who many people would probably consider to be the biggest star in the industry, I think is very, very much so deserving for Jon Moxley. Forks and flamethrowers will be there. It's going to be violent. You're going to see a lot of run-ins as well. We're going to get the Schmaz special, the Schmaz Fest special when it comes to Mox and the Death Riders. So it's going to be interesting when we see that show. But guys, it's been a long night. Got some work to do. It's going to be a big time week. Will not be a Raw post show next week because I will be at Monday Night Raw. So we're going to be back on Wednesday for the Dynamite post show. It's going to be the anniversary show, so that should be good. Hopefully, maybe I can get some content from Raw to share with you guys, but who knows? But we will be back next Wednesday for sure. Night Pops, guys. I am Kevin Zwicker. I'm out.